Ricky Gervais hosting the Golden Globes was an epic sight to behold. We all felt really good. Not just conservatives, but people who feel like the Hollywood liberal elites don't represent us. They talk down to us. They're condescending uber elites with tons of money who have no idea how the real world works. And that's basically what Ricky Gervais said. So many of us at home gave him a standing ovation, while others in the audience at the performance winced and cringed and were not too happy. Afterwards, many people started smearing Ricky Gervais. They started calling him right-wing, but I must admit, a lot of the backlash hasn't come from major media organizations. It's come from people on social media. It seems like a lot of the media, not all, there's been smears, I'm going to show you this, but some, or at least a good portion, have kept their mouths shut, and for good reason. Ricky Gervais was calling them out too. There's something interesting that we got from Ricky Gervais' performance outside of the fact that he just railed into these people. It's exposing the bias of the media. Now, I know most of us know the media is biased, but right-wing comedy exposes just how biased it is, and I'm going to prove it to you. See, it's not just about Ricky Gervais. I wanted to follow up as everyone started calling him right-wing for daring to call out corporations, but it's also about the satirical website Babylon Bee, who does similar things in politics and gets attacked relentlessly, while left-wing comedy never does. When do people come out and target these celebrities and smear them in the press because they criticize oil companies? No, they don't care. Everyone agrees. But when Ricky Gervais calls out Apple, he's right-wing. Take a look at this story. Ricky Gervais, right-wing hero from The Atlantic. They say the backlash against Ricky Gervais' performance at the Golden Globes is still going strong. But the British Comedians Act has won over one hard-to-reach constituency: Hollywood-hating conservatives. They have many more stories on this. But I want to point something out to you. You see, some of you may have already caught this if you're watching this video. I tricked you. Let me refresh this story. And you can see now the date reappears. January 19th, 2011. When Ricky Gervais called out bad movies, they called him right-wing. Ricky Gervais' performance in 2011 was not as political as it was the other day, yet they still smeared him. Because when you insult their corporations, for some reason, you're right-wing. How weird is that? I wanted to point this out as we now go into Ricky Gervais' actual reaction to being called right-wing. Today, with a new story, Ricky Gervais laughs off Golden Globes backlash, stands by, quote, teasing huge corporations and most privileged people in the world. He actually said, how is it right-wing to do this? But it is. Let's get into it. Before we get started, however, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's several ways to give. But the best thing you should do, subscribe to my new channel. I know there's not much there right now, but go to youtube.com/timcastirl because a new show will be emerging soon. In the next coming weeks, I'm going to be doing a more guest-driven and general interest podcast show. I'll be dramatically increasing the amount of content I'm producing, probably up to like 3 hours per day, assuming I can talk that much. We'll see what happens. But youtube.com/timcastirl. Subscribe and get ready. Maybe I shouldn't even tell you to do it. I'll just do it. Whatever. Let's get back to the news. So many people in the media have accused Ricky Gervais. Notably, this guy, Mark Harris, said, "Here's my Ricky Gervais problem. The idea that celebrities are not only pampered babies, but hypocrites who cause the problems they make speeches deploring and should therefore shut up and act, sing, be grateful is a right-wing talking point, and especially stupid one." This individual, Lorraine Ali, the Golden Globes mood was already sober. Thanks to impeachment, threat of war, Iran, and Australian bushfires, the last thing anyone needed was Ricky Gervais there, telling them they sucked. No, we really did need Ricky Gervais there. But I want to point out, there's another article from the Washington Post saying nobody cares. And while I did mention this in my video segment yesterday on my second channel, I want to reiterate for those that missed it. When they say this, that no one cares, they're referring to themselves. They're referring to their bubble of liberal elites living in an ivory tower, looking around the room at all the wealthy individuals shrugging and saying, nobody even cares Ricky Gervais said this. He must be right-wing. Because they haven't looked out the window and looked down. And if you, in the ivory tower, look down, what will you see? The peasants are celebrating. First, let me show you Ricky Gervais' tweet. He said, "How the F can teasing huge corporations and the richest, most privileged people in the world be considered right-wing?" especially when even the Bernie Sanders subreddit was posting his monologue and cheering him on for calling out sweatshops and for insulting the uber wealthy elites who condescend. But I got news for you, Hollywood. Look at the YouTube video. Ricky Gervais, as of this morning, 2 days later, is still the #1 trend on YouTube with 7.7 million views in just over 24 hours. So you want to act like nobody cares? You got another thing coming. But Ricky Gervais is being smeared as right-wing for this. And I think what this does, it does us a favor. It exposes the bias in media. Why is it that if Ricky Gervais calls out Apple, they're like, that's right-wing? What? How? Yet when they go up on stage and call out other corporations, that's left-wing? Why? Because Apple, for some reason, I guess, Tim Cook does a speech about hate speech, and all of a sudden now everything they do will be left-wing because left-wing is about tribalism, not about policy positions or principle. Ricky Gervais called it out. He called it out a long time ago. So I want to show you a couple stories, and then I want to explain why Ricky Gervais is right-wing. Ricky Gervais mocks right-wing label over ridiculing world's most privilege at Golden Globes. This I'm showing you because from the Washington Times, a more conservative outlet. They say Sunday's Golden Globe host has left-wing outlets none too thrilled with his decision to roast Hollywood's elite corporations like Apple and Amazon and the friends of Jeffrey Epstein. How the F can teasing huge corporations and the richest, most privileged people in the world be considered right-wing? Mr. Gervais wrote to his nearly 14 million Twitter followers, and I can actually explain it very simply. First, this story I've highlighted a couple times in the past few weeks from June 3rd, 2016 at Vox.com, a progressive website. Democrats are replacing Republicans as the preferred party of the very wealthy. Perhaps you should have realized, Ricky, that the Democratic Party, the tribal left, is just all of the rich people. Many of the never-Trumpers who have joined in voting for Clinton or joined voting in Clinton 2016 were the wealthy elite Republicans. The people who joined Trump were the populist Republicans and independent voters and former Obama voters. Even Bernie Sanders supporters are calling out the media and the Democrats and the press. It stands to reason right now. The big corporations, the crony capitalists, the Goldman Sachs types, that's the new left. They're the ones claiming that private businesses can do whatever they want. And it's left me, as someone who's always been kind of on the left, in the middle, I don't need, as politically homeless. Here's a story from the LA Times arguing about censorship, social media, and conservatives. They say, no, the courts have repeatedly ruled that social media platforms like Facebook and Google are free to make their own rules on what speech to allow and what speech to block because they are private companies, not government actors subject to the First Amendment anti-censorship rules. They go on to talk about all this stupid nonsense that never had anything to do with any of the arguments from people fighting big tech censorship. It is a bit ironic, I guess, to see many conservatives call out Google and Twitter and Facebook when it's typically been the conservatives saying, private companies, we should deregulate and private companies can do what they want. But like I said, this is the populist versus elitist era. It's not so much left versus right anymore, at least in many different battles. So many of these more elitist papers like the LA Times misframed the argument, saying it's a private company. They can ban whoever they want. The rules that they've employed do not make them, violating the First Amendment or free speech. First of all, many of these outlets have accurately pointed out, yes, they are not violating the First Amendment because the First Amendment specifically refers to the government's ability to restrict speech. But none of us have talked about that. We were talking about, some people probably did, but most people are talking about the concept, the principle of free speech. Okay, the First Amendment protects many different rights. It restricts the government from infringing upon them, and free speech is but one. So it was always strange to me to see the modern left and the media defend private corporations and the ultra-wealthy. How is that left-wing anymore? I don't know. But when Ricky Gervais calls it out, what do they say? You're right-wing. It's really weird, isn't it? The main point I bring up with the private company argument is that the left has always been in favor of regulating companies. When companies grow too large and start implementing, restrictions or policies or actions that are a detriment to our society, we take action to regulate that to prevent bad behavior. But the left today doesn't argue that. The left today argues that private companies can do whatever they want. And to me, it literally makes no sense. But there's another story I want to get to in here, because it's not just Ricky Gervais who exposes this being called right-wing. It's the Babylon Bee. Many of you are probably familiar with the Babylon Bee because they're hilarious and they have many viral hits. They do satire, religious satire, and political satire. Well, for the longest time, there's been an attempt to smear Babylon Bee as fake news. There have been websites like Snopes saying that Babylon Bee is purposefully trying to trick people and they don't label their content, and here we are again. They do the same thing. And now I'm going to show you how comedy like Ricky Gervais and Babylon Bee proves the media is biased against you. First, let me show you this tweet. This is from a former CIA analyst, not somebody in the media, so who cares, right? Well, let's read. She writes, a post from a satirical website has been shared more than 500,000 times, saying that the DNC called for the flag to be at half-mast because of Soleimani. Some family members just called because their Republican friends on FB are circulating it like it's legit. We have a lot of work to do. She links to Donnie O'Sullivan. Donnie O'Sullivan is a reporter for CNN. Now, CNN certainly is unbiased, right? Well, what if I said Babylon Bee and the reporters have walked right into a trap and are being exposed now? Now, listen, we know CNN is the Orange Man Bad channel. It's like the only thing they talk about. So I don't think we need anybody to tell us they're biased. But perhaps this could provide a bit more evidence that maybe could swing some naysayers who don't believe the media really is biased. Let me show you the proof. Donnie O'Sullivan says, to put this in perspective, this is the same number of engagements the top New York Times and CNN stories on Facebook had over the past week. A lot of people sharing this, quote, satirical story on Facebook don't know it's satire. Having a disclaimer buried somewhere on your site that says it's satire seems like a good way to get around a lot of the changes Facebook has made to reduce the spread of clickbait and misinformation. The data I pulled on Facebook engagements is from BuzzSumo, by the way. Some of the comments left by Facebook users sharing the link. Half flag for Soleimani, seriously. I wish this was a joke. I wish this was satire. He then links to a story. Satire or deceit. Christian humor site feuds with Snopes from the New York Times. That's right. And here's the story. Snopes, the fact-checking site, was fact-checking the Babylon Bee because of stories that to most people were completely absurd and obvious jokes. But you might say, Tim, some people still fell for this stuff. So isn't it fair that they're going to point it out? Sure. Let me show you the Babylon Bee. Here's the Babylon Bee website. And trust me, I'm getting to the proof of the media lies. Now, I use a third-party fact-checking site. You've heard me cite it many, many times, called NewsGuard. I believe NewsGuard is subject to many of the same biases as these big media companies because they employ many of the same journalists, but they do a decent job. More importantly, I would say I'd give them a 7 out of 10. You know, I don't like how they are biased, but they are substantially more fair than many in the media. For the Babylon Bee, they don't give it a fake news. They give it a little smiley face. This is a satire or humor website. It's not an actual news source. It publishes false news aimed at American Christian conservatives. That's literally a fact. But they give it a smiley face, not a fake news. Here's what I want to do. Let's click this site. It's this article. I don't care for the story, but let me explain something. The story they've posted says United Methodist Church to split over whether or not to be Christians. I'm going to do a search for the word satire, and nothing comes up. So perhaps CNN was right. They're not labeling any of their stories as satire. This is an outrage, and CNN must report on this. Well, according to NewsGuard's rating, they say that yes, many people have fallen for fake news. Snopes drew widespread criticism debunking a B story titled CNN purchases industrial-sized washing machine to spin news before publication, which reported that the network bought the machine to help journalists spin the news before it was published, saying, although it should have been obvious that the Babylon Bee was just a spoof of the ongoing political brouhaha over alleged news bias and fake news, some readers missed that aspect of the article and interpreted it literally. Is that a joke? Snopes flagged the story as false to Facebook, which hindered the Babylon Bee's ability to share posts on Facebook. Facebook later said the story should have been initially rated as satire. Snopes actually got a satire website deranked for making a story about a washing machine spinning news is serious. You'd think that was satire. No. So okay, let's go back. CNN says they're not even saying it's satire. I mean, people are going to fall for it, man. That's so strange that nobody ever said the same thing about The Onion. Once again, we see the media for what it is. The Onion wrote this story back in 2002. I've chosen this story specifically for a reason. Congress threatens to leave D.C. unless new Capitol is built, from May 29th, 2002. It's a really, really old story. Nowhere in the story does the word satire or satirical appear. They don't label it as satire anywhere. It's just politics.theonion. The reason I highlight this is because NewsGuard notes China fell for it. The Beijing Evening News based a news article on the piece titled Congress Threatens to Leave D.C. Unless New Capitol is Built. They didn't know it was fake either. My response to people who can't tell the difference between obvious jokes about a washing machine spinning news or Congress threatening to leave Washington, D.C. is too bad. If you can't tell what a joke is, it's not our fault. We can't make sure everyone is smart. You know what George Carlin said? Think about how stupid the average person is. Now realize half of them are stupider than that. And we have a problem. But what are you going to do about it? Are you going to put big, bold letters on everything? Now you may be saying, Tim, you're wrong. Okay? The Onion should be labeling their content as satire as well. Just because Babylon Bee doesn't do it doesn't mean the Onion gets a free pass. Okay, so I can point out the media slams and smears the Babylon Bee and doesn't slam and smear the Onion, and the Onion is owned by the Gizmodo whatever network, and I think that shows bias, but fine. Perhaps you will come out and say, nope, I think the Onion should label their content as well. Tim, I think these organizations have to be careful because people might believe the content is real. Is that your argument? Your argument is that you're not going to give the Onion a free pass? Well, now I bring you to the nail in the coffin. Clickhole.com. Now, Clickhole is made by the same people as The Onion. It's owned by the same network. Here's a story. I just clicked it. It's from a few months ago. I don't even know. Animal rights win. KFC has announced that they will now serve their chickens alive. Let's do a search for the word satire. No. Satirical. No, it doesn't appear anywhere. The story is presumably true. Now, I think any sane, reasonable person would recognize that this story is completely false. KFC is not giving out live chickens to people to deal with themselves. It's absurd. But I'm sorry, it's also absurd that CNN would put a washing machine in their studio and put intangible concepts into it to spin around in circles. Literally makes no sense. So I think it's fair to argue that Clickhole also has done nothing to show these aren't real news stories. But again, you might be saying, Tim, listen, Clickhole should also label their content as satire. But let me now show you the proof in the pudding. They smear the Babylon Bee relentlessly. Relentlessly. Here's what NewsGuard says. A satirical news website that publishes deliberately false content to mock clickbait websites. It was created by the team at The Onion. They say this: Clickhole.com's stated goal is to, quote, make sure that all of our content panders to and misleads our readers just enough to make it go viral. The site also warns visitors at the bottom of its homepage that Clickhole uses invented names in all of its stories, except in cases where public figures are being satirized. Any other use of real names is accidental or coincidental. In addition, the site says it is not intended for readers under 18 years of age. However, there have been instances of Clickhole.com content being mistaken for actual news stories. In 2014, the Washington Post gathered responses of Twitter users earnestly reacting to Clickhole articles. In response to a Clickhole article headlined, we took an Israeli child and a Palestinian child and put them together in the same room, and we're going to keep them. The point is, Clickhole says their goal, literal goal, is to make fake news that goes viral. Yet, the media hasn't ever slammed them, or I should say, for the most part. We don't see the same level of ire against Clickhole that we do for Babylon Bee. And again, I'll go back, because I'll be fair. You may be saying, Tim, But, the story about half-mast and the Democrats seems like it's based in reality. I don't think that's an argument because you're presuming what people might expect to be true or not, and that story seems completely ridiculous to me. It's also the fact that Snopes debunked a story that claimed CNN bought a washing machine, for clothes, and put intangible concepts in it so that it could be spun for political reasons. It quite literally isn't physically possible. People thought it was real, and they smeared the Babylon Bee because of it. So let me wrap this up. With Ricky Gervais being smeared as right-wing, and with the media like CNN and Snopes coming after right-wing satire sites, but ignoring the same left-wing, mockery of Republicans and ignoring the left-wing digital sites that do the same thing, have been accused of the same thing, and even a site that says they're intentionally trying to push fake stories to go viral. I think it's plain to see that when you challenge the wealthy elites, the Hollywood liberal elites, these major corporations, and these progressive ideologues, the media is biased against you because that's their tribe. And so I'll leave you with this. The Washington Post ran a story a couple days, the night of the Golden Globes, saying Ricky Gervais did these things, but who cares? No one cared. Nobody cared. The reason they say nobody cared is because when they look around their ivory tower room at all of their super wealthy liberal elites, nobody did care. And he's like, I don't even know. I don't even see anybody caring. They look at their Twitter feeds of liberal elites. Nobody says anything and say, nobody cared. Because they failed to look down at the peasant revolt that's been going on for the past several years. That got Donald Trump elected and nearly almost got Bernie Sanders elected. But the Democrats are still facing it today. So I'll tell you this. Comedy is great. They call Joe Rogan right-wing. Seriously, they do. They're now calling Ricky Gervais right-wing. Well, they called him right-wing before. The fact is, the establishment has a left-wing bias. The media has a left-wing bias. It's a fact. And hopefully this provided enough evidence to at least convince you to start researching more on your own to see they really do. I'm not saying this to defend right-wing ideas. I don't think Babylon Bee is pushing right-wing ideas necessarily, other than they're making jokes, and the jokes are funny. If you can't laugh at yourself, well, then you got serious issues, dude. Trump supporters have learned this a long time ago. Donald Trump is very self-deprecating when he does his rallies, and his supporters love it. Yet on the left, they take offense to any joke. Not all people on the left, not every single person. Ricky Gervais is on the left. But look how they reacted to him making fun of them. They wince, they scowl, they call him right-wing because they can't handle it. Well, get out of the kitchen if you can't stand the heat. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. YouTube.com/TimCastNews. It is a different channel, and I will see you all then.